the sound. The thunderous crash of Mongol siege engines hurling massive stones against walls that refused to crack. The terrifying whistle of arrows bouncing harmlessly off fortifications designed to swallow entire armies. The desperate screams of attackers realizing they faced not just walls, but engineering nightmares that turned siege warfare into systematic suicide. This is not some medieval European castle. This is the brutal reality of Chinese fortress engineering. Defensive systems so advanced, so systematically designed to consume attacking forces, that they remained unconquered for centuries while empires rose and fell around them. We have all heard stories of impregnable fortresses, but what these 5 Chinese strongholds reveal is something else entirely. They weren't just built to withstand attacks. They were built to psychologically destroy anyone foolish enough to attempt siege warfare against engineering that seemed to defy the laws of physics. You think medieval castles were impressive? Chinese fortresses would make European strongholds look like children's sandcastles. Behind this image of ancient stone walls lay defensive engineering so sophisticated, so brutally efficient at killing attackers, that they created the ultimate military paradox. Fortresses so strong that attacking them became strategically impossible. This wasn't random construction. It was systematic defensive warfare, a coordinated approach to fortress design that combined natural terrain, advanced engineering, and psychological terror into defensive systems that could break the will of entire armies before the first siege engine was assembled. Today, we're diving into 5 Chinese fortresses that redefined what impregnable actually means. Strongholds so advanced that they stood unconquered through centuries of warfare, foreign invasions, and technological evolution. This is the story of the fortresses that never fell. But here's what most people don't realize about Jia Pass. This wasn't just another section of the Great Wall. This was the ultimate choke point. A fortress system so strategically positioned and defensively sophisticated that it controlled the entire Silk Road and made invasion from the west a logistical impossibility. Picture the systematic genius. The western terminus of the Ming Great Wall, positioned at the narrowest point of the Hexi Corridor, where the Gobi Desert meets the Kilian Mountains. Any army attempting to invade China from Central Asia had to pass through this single, heavily fortified gateway. But here's where it gets insane. Jia Pass wasn't just a wall. It was a defense-in-depth system with multiple layers of fortification designed to channel attackers into killing zones where they could be systematically destroyed. Archaeological evidence reveals the fortress structure. An outer wall creating a Barbican approach, a massive trapezoidal main fortress with overlapping fields of fire, and flanking Wengcheng gates that could trap entire assault forces in enclosed courtyards where they would be annihilated by crossfire. The real genius was in the logistical impossibility it created for attackers. The fortress was positioned in terrain so barren and waterless that any besieging army would face starvation and dehydration long before they could breach the walls. Chinese military records describe Jia Pass as the place where armies go to die. Recognition that the fortress had achieved the ultimate defensive victory by making attack attempts literally suicidal. But here's what's truly terrifying about this system. It was designed to be psychologically devastating. The fortress was visible from miles away, giving approaching armies plenty of time to contemplate the impossibility of their task and the certainty of their destruction. The sound was like a door slamming shut on the dreams of conquerors, the systematic denial of passage that announced to the world that China's western frontier was absolutely, completely, utterly impregnable. For over 6 centuries, Jia Pass stood as the ultimate proof that superior engineering could make military conquest impossible, no matter how large the attacking force or how advanced their siege technology. Get this, the Nanjing city walls weren't just defensive barriers. They were the longest fortification system ever built, creating a defensive perimeter so vast and sophisticated that it turned an entire city into an impregnable fortress that could withstand any siege technology known to medieval warfare. Imagine the systematic scale. Over 35 kilometers of walls following the natural contours of hills, rivers, and valleys to create a defensive system that was literally integrated with the landscape itself. Picture the engineering mastery. Walls built from massive stone foundations, topped with fired brick construction, creating barriers that were not just tall and thick, but designed to absorb and deflect the impact of siege engines without structural failure. But here's where it gets insane. The Nanjing walls featured an early quality control system where every brick was stamped with the name of the official and craftsman responsible for its production, creating accountability that ensured construction quality that has lasted over 6 centuries. Archaeological analysis reveals wall construction techniques that used mathematical principles to distribute stress loads across the entire structure, creating fortifications that became stronger under attack rather than weaker. The real genius was in the irregular design that followed natural terrain rather than geometric patterns. This made the walls impossible to predict or systematically attack, forcing besiegers to adapt their tactics to constantly changing defensive configurations. But here's what's truly shocking about Nanjing's defensive system. It included massive gatehouses with multiple sealed courtyards designed to trap attacking forces in urn courts, where they could be systematically annihilated by defenders firing from protected positions. Chinese historical records describe the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom holding Nanjing for over a decade against Qing siege efforts, with the Ming walls largely frustrating imperial siege warfare until massive mining operations were finally successful. The sound was like geological permanence made manifest. Walls so perfectly integrated with the natural landscape that they seemed to be extensions of the earth itself rather than human constructions. The fortress city represented the ultimate expression of defensive engineering. A system so large and sophisticated that it could protect not just a garrison, but an entire urban population through extended siege warfare. Here's where it gets insane. Xiangyang wasn't just a fortress. It was the ultimate strategic choke point that controlled the only viable route between northern and southern China, making its capture a geometric necessity for any force attempting to unify the empire. Picture the systematic positioning. Located where the Han River flows toward the Yangtze, creating a natural bottleneck that forced any north-south military movement through a single, heavily fortified crossing point. Imagine the defensive genius. High stone walls reinforced over centuries, with the city's design integrating the river as both a natural moat and a supply lifeline that made complete blockade virtually impossible. But here's what's truly terrifying about Xiangyang's defensive capabilities. It was designed to use water itself as a weapon. The fortress could control river flow, flood surrounding areas, and maintain naval superiority that prevented effective siege operations. Archaeological evidence reveals harbor facilities, water gates, and hydraulic systems that allowed the fortress to maintain supply lines and naval operations even during extended siege warfare. The real test came during the siege of Xiangyang from 1267 to 1273. 6 years of continuous assault by the Mongol Empire that became the ultimate demonstration of Chinese defensive engineering versus the world's most advanced siege technology. Chinese military records describe the garrison holding out for an astonishing 6 years against Kublai Khan's forces, using the fortress's integrated defensive systems to neutralize every siege technique the Mongols could deploy. But here's where it gets truly shocking. Xiangyang only fell when the Mongols deployed counterweight trebuchets built with Persian and Arab engineering expertise, creating siege weapons capable of breaching stone walls that had been considered impregnable. The sound was like the collision of civilizations. The systematic testing of Chinese defensive engineering against Mongol siege warfare that represented the ultimate medieval military technology competition. The 6-year defense became the ultimate symbol of Song loyalty and sacrifice, single-handedly delaying the final Mongol conquest of China and proving that superior fortress design could neutralize even the most advanced siege technology of its era. Even in defeat, Xiangyang had demonstrated that Chinese fortress engineering could force the world's most successful military empire to develop entirely new siege technologies just to achieve victory. But the ultimate fortress wasn't built by human hands, it was carved from living rock. Dangja Pass represents the perfect fusion of natural terrain and human engineering, creating a defensive position so strong that the saying, "One man can hold the pass against 10,000, became literal military doctrine. Picture the geological perfection. A narrow sword-like cleft in the Daba Mountains that controls the only ancient road into the fertile Sichuan Basin. Nature's own fortress that human engineers enhanced into the ultimate defensive choke point. Imagine the systematic impossibility. Sheer cliffs forming natural walls hundreds of feet high, with a single narrow passage that forced attacking armies into single-file columns where they could be systematically destroyed by defenders firing from protected positions. But here's where it gets insane. The pass wasn't just narrow, it was engineered to maximize defensive advantage. Human construction included walls extending up the cliff faces, creating a fortified canyon that turned the natural choke point into a killing machine. Archaeological evidence reveals defensive installations with multiple firing positions, supplies caches, and even primitive early warning systems that could detect approaching armies from miles away. The real genius was in understanding that topographical defense could completely nullify numerical advantage. No matter how large an attacking force, only a few soldiers could approach the pass at any time, making massive armies tactically irrelevant. Chinese historical records describe Jiang Wei's defense of Dangja Pass against Chao Wei forces during the Three Kingdoms period, where a small garrison held off vastly superior numbers until the pass was finally circumvented by an impossible flanking maneuver through seemingly impassable terrain. But here's what's truly terrifying about Dangja Pass. It was so strong that it could only be defeated by avoiding it completely. General Deng Ai's famous victory required leading his troops on a treacherous descent through terrain so dangerous that most of his army nearly died just reaching the battlefield. The sound was like the earth itself becoming a weapon. The systematic use of geological formations to create defensive positions that transcended human engineering and approached natural invincibility. The pass embodied the ultimate Chinese defensive philosophy, that the strongest fortresses weren't built by human hands, but discovered in the landscape and enhanced through engineering that worked with natural forces rather than against them. What's truly shocking is that the ultimate Chinese fortress wasn't designed to stop foreign armies. It was built to protect the emperor himself from the most dangerous threat of all, his own people plotting rebellion and assassination within the heart of imperial power. Picture the systematic paranoia. The Forbidden City as the ultimate fortified palace complex, designed to create multiple layers of security that could protect the Son of Heaven from threats that conventional military fortifications couldn't address. Imagine the defensive sophistication. A 52-meter-wide moat surrounding 10-meter-high walls with 4 massive corner towers, creating a fortress within the capital that was designed to withstand both external siege and internal coup attempts. But here's where it gets insane. The Forbidden City's defenses weren't just physical. They were psychological and symbolic. The structure was designed to instill awe and submission while making the very thought of attacking the emperor seem like sacrilege against heaven itself. Archaeological evidence reveals construction techniques that included floors paved with multiple layers of bricks to prevent tunneling, hidden passages for emergency escape, and even primitive security systems that could detect unauthorized entry. The real genius was in creating layered symbolic defense, where each courtyard represented increasing levels of imperial sanctity. forcing any attacker to commit progressively greater acts of sacrilege as they approach the emperor. But here's what's truly terrifying about the Forbidden City's defensive concept. It was designed to protect not just a person, but an institution. The fortress had to safeguard the entire concept of imperial authority against challenges that could come from anywhere within the empire. Chinese historical records describe the Forbidden City as the untouchable center of the world. Recognition that they had created a fortress that protected not just physical space, but the psychological foundations of imperial power itself. The sound was like silence itself becoming a weapon. The systematic creation of sacred space so psychologically powerful that most potential attackers would lose their nerve before even attempting to breach the outer walls. For 5 centuries, the Forbidden City succeeded in its ultimate mission, protecting the institution of imperial power through defensive engineering that combined physical barriers with psychological deterrence and symbolic authority. These 5 fortresses represent more than just superior defensive engineering. They showcase a systematic approach to fortress design that understood warfare as much more than just physical combat. It was psychological, logistical, and symbolic warfare that could defeat enemies before they ever reached the walls. The Chinese approach was methodical, scientific, and absolutely brilliant in its recognition that the strongest fortresses weren't just built to withstand attacks. They were built to make attacks seem impossible, suicidal, or sacrilegious. These fortresses proved that superior engineering, combined with strategic positioning and psychological understanding, could create defensive systems that transcended the limitations of any individual military technology or tactical doctrine. So the next time you see ancient fortifications, remember that you're looking at more than just walls and towers. You're seeing the physical manifestation of strategic genius that could turn defense into the ultimate offensive weapon. These weren't just fortresses. They were engineering statements that proved human ingenuity could create barriers that would endure as long as civilization itself.